city was always choking on coal smoke, on cigar smoke, on the fumes of bootleg whiskey sloshed in dirty glasses under the light of broken lamps. But on Mulberry Street that night, the smoke was different, thicker, metallic, copper-sweet, the kind that clung to the back of the tongue and whispered of blood. Luca Moretti shouldered another crate down at the docks, his hands blistered and cracked, his back bent like every other immigrant man breaking for pennies in the grey dawn. He kept his eyes down because here the wrong look could mean a knife in the ribs. A longshoreman's life was already borrowed time. But Luca wasn't afraid of knives, he was afraid of himself. Because beneath his patched shirt and hollow stomach, something stirred whenever the fog rolled in thick. Something ancient, clawed and waiting. The dock boss barked orders, slapping ledgers against his palm. The sound sharp as pistol fire. Behind him, men in sharp suits waited by a Packard with blacked-out windows. The Mancini boys, Mafia. They watched Luca like wolves sizing up a stray dog. He knew why. Rumors had spread, rumors of a thing in the alleys. A beast that tore up rival crews and left bodies flayed open like gutted pigs. Luca carried those whispers in his bones. That night, under a swollen yellow moon sagging above the East River, it began again. The first scream was swallowed by the fog. Dock workers turned, half thinking it was a gull or a drunk. Then the second scream came, a wet, tearing shriek that no human lungs could make. Luca felt it before he heard it, his jaw locked. His bones singing like violin strings stretched too tight. Heat flooded him, and then the cold, marrow gnawing. Silver cold, his knees buckled. Hands shot out to steady him, but he shoved them away. Staggering toward the water, the Packard's headlights lit his back. And he caught a glimpse of himself in the sheen of the river, eyes already glowing. Pupils split, veins crawling black across his skin. He didn't have time to hide. The change ripped him apart in front of them. Skin bubbled, ribs cracked outward, his spine arched like a scythe. Tearing through flesh as fur sprouted in bristling patches, his jaw split wide, teeth lengthening, lips tearing at the corners until a muzzle snarled back at the stunned gangsters. His hands curled inward, fingers snapping, nails erupting into black claws. The Packard's doors flew open. The Mancini boys came out with Thompsons, the chatter of bolts pulling back like metal thunder. But it was too late. Luca was gone. What stood on the dock was the beast. It fell on them in silence. One swing of its claws shredded the nearest man's chest, spraying the fog with scarlet. Another swung his Tommy gun, firing wild into the haze. Bullets punched into Luca's hide. But he hardly slowed. He barreled into the shooter, jaws snapping down on his throat. The man's last gurgle blended with the chatter of gunfire echoing across the East River. The dock boss dropped his ledger and ran. The other dock workers scattered. But not all would escape. The beast tore through crates. Barrels, men. Anything that moved, anything that stank of fear. By dawn, the wharf was painted red. The Packard smoldered, riddled with claw marks. Its windows shattered like jagged teeth. The city's rats had their feast, and Luca woke on the cold stone steps of St. Anthony's, naked, blood-crusted, his body reeking of cordite and brine. The church doors were locked, but he could hear the echo of prayers within. He wept quietly, knowing the beast had fed again, and that New York was beginning to notice. The first newspaper called it a dockside massacre. The second called it a miracle of God's wrath. By the 6th, the word beast was in print, and the city started looking up at the moon like it was an indictment. Down in the Bowery, where the pavements sweated gin and the stairwells smelled like secrets, Don Vito Mancini lit a cigar with hands that didn't tremble. Behind him, the speakeasy throbbed with trumpet and low laughter, a red lamp washing the lacquered bar like sunset on spilled blood. The club was called the Green Door, because everything important in New York happens behind one. "Listen," said Mancini, lifting 2 fingers. The band fell to a hush. Even the clink of glasses seemed to hold its breath. A thing without a name has taken men of mine. It does not pay its debts. It does not bend the knee. That ends tonight. His consigliere, Salvatore Sable Caruso, unrolled a sheet of butcher paper on the bar. It wasn't names, those came later. It was a sketch, claws like boning knives, teeth like piano keys, a wolf's head, but wrong in the eyes, almost human. And furious at the fact, 5 grand, Sable said, tapping the sketch. For the head. 10 if it's still talking when it comes through that door. A murmur rippled. 5 grand was a fortune even to men who carried fortunes in their coats. And word travels quickest from the Bowery to Hell's Kitchen, where the Irish crews drink their daylight and plan their midnights. By the time the trumpet struck up again, the Gophers had huddled in an alley 3 streets over, and their boss, Kieran Red Doyle, was chewing a matchstick to splinters. 5 grand to kill a bedtime story, Red laughed. But his laugh had the brittle ring of a glass already cracked. We'll take their money and buy them a chapel. A Tammany Hall alderman named Quinn, cheeks damp with political grease, passed an envelope under the table to a police detective built like an oak wardrobe. "Keep the press quiet," he muttered. The detective's badge winked like a cheap star. Detective Sullivan had shot men for less than the taste of the whiskey he now swallowed. Across town, behind the scabbed doors of St. Anthony's, a candle guttered, and Sister Magdalene drew the blinds. Luca, scrubbed raw and wrapped in a donated coat, sat on a pew, with his spine pressed to the wood as if he could anchor himself to something sacred. The priest's voice drifted from the sacristy, soft, like a man erasing a confession with water. "It will get worse," Sister Magdalene said, eyes like winter, voice like mercy. "When men begin to hunt you, they become their own wolves." "I'm not asking for absolution," Luca said. "I'm asking for a lock strong enough to hold me." "There isn't one," she replied, "but there are choices. There are always choices." On Hester Street, an old jeweler named Abram Weiss closed up shop and opened a cigar box from the false bottom of his counter. Inside lay cartridge molds old as empire and a pouch of filings that glittered dull and dangerous in the gaslight. Silver Stories had a way of making metal valuable again. He had a buyer waiting, a cop with a side hustle and a Saints medal black with thumb grease. Back in the Green Door, the hunt was planned like any other job. Sable sketched routes on a map with a glass rod dipped in whiskey. "We herd," he said, "not chase. We drive the thing toward the river, where our boys wait with chains, no crossfire, no panic. And if bullets don't work," he smiled, a cat thinking about a bird, "we have other tools." "What other tools?" asked someone who didn't know when to stop his mouth. Sable touched the rod to his lips. "Silver is for rings and caskets," he said, "but tonight we'll see if it fits in a drum." The streets breathed fog. It rolled low, clinging to ankles, and made lampposts into drowning men's arms. The Gophers moved like a rumor, quiet until they weren't. Ed Doyle wore a butcher's apron over his suit, a joke that made his boys grin too loudly. Detective Sullivan, badge tucked away, drank his courage from a paper bag and checked his revolver by the light of a pharmacy window. The moon climbed, indifferent and tired, inside Luca. First ache stirred. He tried chains, he tried prayer, he tried to imagine a winter with no sky. But the thing that lived in him understood only a sense. Bone to bone, tendon to tendon, until all the careful lies of a man snapped and fell away like icicles under a boot. In a tenement stairwell, a child woke and whispered, "Mama, the dog's crying." It wasn't a dog. The first to find him were 2 gophers chasing the sound of a bottle rolling on cobbles. They rounded the corner with their laughter still sharp enough to cut them when the alley went still, hot and animal. The shadow that rose from the garbage heap carried city stink on its fur. Coal, urine, anchovy brine, cheap perfume. It moved like a hinge too big for its door. One boy lifted his sword off. The beast knocked him down so hard his soul might have risen before his breath. The other fired point blank into the open mouth of night, and the buckshot sparked off something that shouldn't have sparked, bone or stubbornness, and then the world became teeth. The scream drew more men than any whistle. Irish, Italian, cops without uniforms. A drunk priest with a broken bottle for a cross. They flooded the mouth of the alley until the city itself seemed to be trying to swallow what it had birthed. The beast hit them like a flood. Gunfire stitched light through the fog. Knives wrote quick signatures across fur and failed to be read. Sullivan stepped forward with a revolver he'd loaded from Abram Weiss's pouch. He fired, and the bullet sang a note that wasn't quite music. The beast lurched, surprised. "Silver," Sullivan breathed, as if naming a saint. But victory is a word men use in rooms. In alleys there is only the next breath, the next swing, the next mistake. Red Doyle rushed in with a chain and caught a wrist that wasn't a wrist anymore. The beast turned, slow as a clock's last tick, and took Red's cheek off like peeling fruit. The chain clattered wet from the far end. A Packard rolled slow and soundless. Its engine a purr in a city of growls. Sable stood on the running board. Drum-fed Thompson cradled like a bouquet. When the alley opened enough for the line of fire, He squeezed the trigger, and the street became hail. Men ducked, men fell. The beast climbed the wall on claws that found brick like the piano finds middle C. It launched from a second-story windowsill into the shadowed maw of night and was gone onto the rooftops. Where the city keeps its true roads, the aftermath smelled like pennies. Mantles of fog drifted through bodies and made them sacred. Sullivan pressed a rag to Red's wound and muttered something between a curse and a prayer. Sable walked the alley with the slow certainty of a pallbearer, counting, deciding who would be mourned and who would be explained away. "Drive it south next time," he said to the men who could still hear. "Corner it against the river. We don't chase it, we starve it of exits above." On a tar roof studded with glass like a field of broken stars, Luca crouched bleeding from the silver kiss. Something in him remembered Sister Magdalene's eyes. Something remembered a child's voice, thinking the cries belonged to a dog. He stared at his own hand, half fur, half man, and hated both because both wanted different deaths. Across the street, through a slit of curtain, a woman watched with the stillness of a cathedral statue. Gianna Rossi, nurse by day, bootleg medic by necessity, had bound 100 men the city claimed it wasn't bleeding. She saw the wolf's hesitation, and the man inside it like a candle trapped in a skull. She did not scream, she took note by dawn. Headlines owed favors. The alderman phoned the editors. The editors phoned the morgue. Bodies were renamed as accidents or foreign words, but rumors don't need names, and they multiply like rats. The bounty rose to 15 grand. The silver orders doubled. And the Bowery learned a new prayer, not to be brave, not to be right, just to be missed by the moon. The green door was packed tighter than a coffin with 4 bodies. Smoke curled toward the rafters, and the brass band played like they were trying to drown out the memory of screams. But men with scars don't forget easy. They nursed their whiskey like it could erase the night, though their knuckles still twitched at shadows near the door. Don Vito Mancini sat at the head table beneath a gilt-framed mirror. Though the glass had been cracked from a bullet long ago, the fracture ran across his reflection like a scar. But the Don kept smiling, his teeth white as bone dice. To his left, Sable leaned in, murmuring names, deaths, and the bloody mathematics of vengeance. 17 men down, Sable said. The Gophers lost 4. 2 cops didn't make it home, and Doyle, well, Doyle will be lucky if he remembers how to drink through what's left of his jaw. Mancini puffed his cigar until the tip glowed like a devil's eye. A wolf doesn't eat 17 men in one night. This thing isn't just killing, it's declaring. The word lingered in the smoke, declaring, as if the beast had signed its name across New York's underworld in blood. Blood and politics. Detective Sullivan stood near the bar, out of place in his cheap suit but too dangerous to laugh at. He cradled his silver-loaded revolver like a holy relic. The bullet hurt it, he said. Not enough to kill, but enough to make it bleed. Then we bleed it more, Mancini said. Silver is the price of survival now. Whoever supplies it controls this city, which was why Abram Weiss, the old jeweler, found himself summoned into the green door like a lamb into a wolf's den. He shuffled forward, hat clutched, eyes darting from gangster to gangster. He knew men like these didn't pay for silver. They buried men who held it. You make more, Mancini said simply. As though ordering wine, Abram licked dry lips. It is not so simple, Don. Silver must be pure, melted clean, forged with care. Each cartridge takes hours. Then you work faster, Sable interrupted, leaning close enough for Abram to smell the brandy on his breath. Because until the beast is dead, every man in this room walks with a noose around his neck. And we don't like nooses. The beast refuge across town. The wolf lay hidden in a half-collapsed boarding house, the plaster walls bleeding damp. Luca's body was a ruin, ribs bruised, shoulder torn. The silver bullet lodged deep like a splinter from hell itself. He had wrapped the wound in rags, but the stink of burned flesh rose from it. Gianna Rossi found him there. She slipped in through the broken window, a black doctor's bag clutched in her hands, her eyes fierce as lantern light. You should be dead, she whispered, kneeling at his side. Sometimes, Luca rasped. I wish I was, but she didn't flinch. She cut the rags away, examined the wound, and with steady hands began her work. She had stitched bullet holes before, but none where the skin twitched and tried to heal even as the metal poisoned it. You're no man, she said. No, Luca admitted, his voice breaking like driftwood. But I'm not the monster they think either. Her eyes locked on his. Then prove it. Before this city burns itself alive trying to kill you, the pact back at the green door. Mancini poured whiskey onto the butcher paper sketch of the beast until the ink blurred and bled. Tonight, he declared, we change the rules. The gangs fight each other for scraps while this thing feeds. No more, we call a truce, Italian, Irish, even the coppers. Until the beast is gone, we're one family. The room erupted, men shouted. Fists slammed tables, curses rose like smoke. A truce was an insult, but Don Vito raised his hand, and silence returned like a leash tugged tight. Listen well, he said. A wolf walks our streets. If it can't be killed by bullets, then it will be killed by hunger. We will trap it, starve it, and when it comes crawling, we will end it together. Any man who refuses, he tapped ash onto the butcher paper where the beast's eye had been drawn, is already dead. Rooftop howled that night. The pact sealed itself in blood and gin, but far above, on the slate roofs overlooking Little Italy, the beast crouched under the swollen moon. Its breath steamed in the cold, its wound pulsed silver fire, and its eyes, Luca's eyes, stared down at the streets where men moved like ants with guns. He could smell their rage, their fear, their sweat. He could hear the Don's voice echoing through alleyways. And when the church bells tolled midnight, the beast lifted its muzzle and howled. The sound rolled over rooftops and tenements, rattled window glass, and made even the hardest killers grip their guns tighter. It wasn't just a howl, it was a warning. The pact spread through the city like rot through a barrel of apples, Italian, Irish, and crooked cops, men who would sooner slit each other's throats over territory, now found themselves marching under one shadow. The promise of 15 grand and the right to brag they'd killed the beast. They called it the hunt, and for one night, the gangs of New York stopped fighting each other to fight something older. Setting the stage, the plan was simple on paper. Deadly in practice, they'd use the Bowery as a snare. The gophers would drive it down from the rooftops, setting fires in the alleys like shepherd dogs pushing sheep. The Mancini boys would block the north end with trucks and sandbags. Machine guns hidden under tarps, the cops, led by Sullivan, would lock the southern exits and keep the press away. In the middle, at an abandoned brewery, they'd bait the trap with blood and fear. Sable Caruso outlined it all in chalk on the brewery wall, his smile curling as if he already saw the beast strung up. We don't give it a choice. He said, we give it a funnel, and when the funnel closes, the wolf will be drinking silver bait and silence. A single man was dragged into the brewery's dark shell, a snitch named Carlo, who'd tried to double-cross the Mancinis with the Irish. Now he hung by his wrists from an iron beam, shirt torn, skin cut so blood dripped steadily onto the cracked floor. Carlo whimpered prayers no god would hear. The gangs lit lanterns, their shadows huge against the brewery walls. Outside, the city hushed itself. Even the jazz seemed to fade, like the music knew it wasn't welcome. Detective Sullivan wiped sweat from his temple. His silver bullets jingled in their pouch. Cold even through the leather, it'll smell him before it sees him, he muttered. That's the point, Sable replied. Fear is a perfume. The rising midnight came, and the moon rose swollen and crimson, its light pouring through the brewery's broken windows like a wound opening in the sky. Carlo's whimpers turned frantic. The dripping blood slowed, then stopped, his body swaying on the chain. Every man cocked his weapon, every breath was held. And then the silence broke, not with a footstep, not with a voice, but with the tearing sound of claws sinking into brick. The wall buckled, plaster rained down, a shape surged from the shadows like smoke with teeth. Carlo shrieked once before the sound was drowned in a crunch that echoed like a hammer striking marrow. Men opened fire, Tommy guns roared, pistols spat flame. Bullets shredded the dark until the brewery looked like it was lit by lightning. The beast howled, its roar shaking dust from the rafters. Shots tore into its body, some biting deeper where silver found flesh. It staggered but did not fall. Instead, it leapt. One Mancini soldier vanished beneath its claws. His scream cut short. Another sprayed lead, bullets chewing the wall instead of the monster. The gophers rushed in with chains, swinging like blacksmiths gone mad. The chains wrapped fur and limb, and for a heartbeat it seemed the trap might hold. But the wolf twisted, muscles snapping steel links like dry reeds. It slammed a gopher into a column, skull cracking like glass. Another it hurled into the lanterns. Flame bursting across the floor, the brewery filled with fire. The frenzy smoke choked the rafters. Men coughed, blind, their gunfire ragged. Sullivan forced his way forward, silver revolver steady. He saw the beast thrashing in the inferno, its fur-singed eyes glowing like coals. Now! Sullivan roared and fired. The bullet struck deep in its shoulder. The beast reeled, snarling, stumbling back against the burning wall. A chorus of shots followed. Silver biting again and again. Blood sprayed the fire, hissing as it hit flame. For a moment, for one fragile heartbeat, the impossible seemed possible. The beast dropped to its knees. Men began to cheer. But Luca, what was left of him, wasn't done. The escape, with a howl that drowned the crackle of fire, the beast surged upward. It tore through the ceiling beams, splinters raining down, and hurled itself onto the roof. Flames licked behind it, and screaming in the smoke below. On the rooftops, it staggered, wounded but alive, its breath ragged. Blood poured in rivulets down its arm, dripping silver-black onto the tar. But survival was its oldest instinct, and so it ran across rooftops, over chimneys, away into the burning city. Aftermath at dawn. The brewery was nothing but a charred skeleton. 20 men dead, dozens more wounded. Mancini stood among the ruins, his cigar trembling between his lips for the first time in years. "This city belongs to men," he hissed, "not to fairy tales. Not to wolves, but as the ashes cooled, every man knew the truth. They hadn't trapped the beast. The beast had survived their trap. And survival in New York is the same as victory." The city stank of ash and failure. The brewery still smoldered, sending curls of black smoke into a dawn sky that looked too clean for what had happened. Reporters begged for scraps of truth, but the cops muttered about accidents, gas leaks and explosions. No one printed the word werewolf, but every bartender, every gambler, every dockhand whispered it over their whiskey. New York had always belonged to gangs. Now it belonged to something else. The beast in the headlines. Detective Sullivan read the paper in a greasy diner, silver bullets rattling in his pocket like dice with loaded odds. He saw the lies written in bold type. Warehouse fire claims 20. His jaw clenched. He'd seen the claw marks, the blood slick with moonlight. He knew the truth, and yet as he sipped burnt coffee, Sullivan felt a tug in his gut that wasn't fear, it was respect. The gangs had thrown everything at the beast, and still it walked away. That kind of power made men reconsider who ran this city. Mancini's rage in Little Italy. Don Vito Mancini raged like a king whose crown had been stolen. His lieutenants cowered while he smashed glasses against the wall. "You shame me," he snarled. 20 men dead, and what do we hold? "Nothing but fire and smoke." Sable leaned against the piano, cool as ice. "Not nothing. We know silver hurts it. We know fire drives it wild. And we know fear is spreading. Fear, Don, is worth more than whiskey. More than bullets." Mancini glared at him. "Fear doesn't pay tribute. Fear doesn't fill my pockets." "No," Sable said, smiling, "but maybe the beast can." The wolf on the rooftops while the gangs argued. The beast claimed new ground. Luca, half man, half nightmare, moved across rooftops with a predator's ease, hunting by moonlight. He didn't kill without thought now. He chose a gambling den where the gophers collected protection money. Shredded open, its coffers scattered to the streets, a warehouse where the Mancinis stored stolen liquor. Crates smashed, the wolf's howl echoing through the empty barrels. A crooked cop who beat confessions out of immigrants in the tombs, found ripped apart in his patrol car, his badge clenched in jaws that should not have been human. Newspapers called it gang violence, but the whispers gave it another name. The Wolf King. A city divided, the nickname spread faster than bullets. To some, the Wolf King was a curse. To others, he was justice. Tenants who'd spent years handing over rent to thugs lit candles at their windows after each strike. Mothers hushed their children with stories of the wolf who punished wicked men. And in the shadows, Gianna Rossi watched it all unfold. She treated the wounds he left behind, not for him, but for the innocent caught in his wake. She began to see the pattern in his violence. He wasn't just killing, he was pruning, stripping away the rot. But every night he changed. Luca lost more of himself. The man dwindled. The beast grew bold. Soon there would be no line. Sullivan's warning. Detective Sullivan stood in St. Anthony's, cap in hand, speaking to Father Matteo. "The gangs think they can control it. They can't. It's not a soldier. It's a king, and kings don't take orders." Father Matteo's rosary clicked in his hand. "Kings fall like any man." Sullivan shook his head. "This isn't a man anymore." Mulberry Street on a night thick with fog. Luca stalked Mulberry Street itself, the beating heart of Mancini territory. He moved like smoke through the alleys, claws dragging sparks against the cobblestones. The gangs had posted guards, but fear rotted their discipline. When the first howl split the night, half of them dropped their guns and fled. The Wolf King tore through the rest. Not with slaughter, but with spectacle. He hurled bodies against walls where all could see. He left claw marks carved into doors like signatures. He dragged one lieutenant alive into the square and howled over him until the man fainted from terror. By dawn, the message was clear. Mulberry Street was no longer Mancini's. It was his. The shift Don Vito sat in his club with the lights off. Cigar burned down to nothing. For the first time in his life, he felt the edges of power slip away. The Wolf King wasn't just a threat. He was a rival boss, one who couldn't be bribed, couldn't be jailed, couldn't even be understood. And in that realization, fear turned to desperation. Desperation that birthed a new idea. If bullets won't kill him, Mancini said softly, then maybe a knife in the soul will. Sable smiled like the devil himself. Then we bleed him where it hurts, not the body, the heart. The city didn't sleep anymore. It lay awake under a sick moon, waiting for the next howl. The Wolf King had turned streets into his kingdom, and every gunman, gambler, and priest knew the rules had changed. But men like Don Vito Mancini didn't surrender. They schemed, and schemes cut deeper than bullets. The seed of treachery, Sable Caruso, sat across from his boss in the smoky back room of the Green Door, pouring 2 glasses of Chianti as if it were communion. "We can't break the wolf," Sable said, his voice soft, serpentine, "but maybe we can break the man." Mancini's eyes narrowed. "If he is even still a man." "He is," Sable said. "The girl proves it." He slid a photograph across the table. Grainy, taken from the shadows. Gianna Rossi, leaving the tenement with her doctor's bag. Hair pinned back against the night wind. She's patched him up twice now. Risked herself for him. If he bleeds, she binds him. If he hides, she finds him. Every king has a weakness. This one wears a nurse's smile. Mancini exhaled smoke through his nose, lips curling. "Then we crown her our Judas." The trap within the trap, the plan spread through the gangs like a disease. They didn't whisper about Silver now. They whispered about Gianna. The Gophers were ordered to shadow her every step. Irish boys leaned against lampposts, lighting cigarettes and watching her windows. Mancini soldiers sat in cafes, pretending to read papers while their eyes tracked her like hounds. Even Sullivan, watching from afar, realized too late what they were planning. One rainy night, as she crossed Mulberry Street with her bag, a Packard rolled up silent beside her. A door yawned open and hands dragged her inside. She fought like a wildcat, nails raking, teeth biting, but there were 4 of them, and she was small. The car sped away into the fog. The wolf's grief Luca smelled her absence before he saw it. The tenement stank of fear, the air wrong, the sheets of her bed cold. Her bag had been left behind on the floor, its instruments scattered like spilled bones. He dropped to his knees, claws digging into the wood. A sound rose from him, half human sob, half wolf's howl that rattled the glass in the windows. The Wolf King was no longer hunting territory, he was hunting blood. Gianna's ordeal. They took her to an abandoned slaughterhouse on the river. Iron hooks still dangling like steel rosaries. Chains hung from the beams, clinking in the draft. Mancini sat in a chair, immaculate as ever, cigar glowing in the dark. "You've mended him," the Don said, voice smooth. "So you know what he is, and you know he can't live in a world of men." Gianna spat blood where one of the soldiers had struck her. "He's more man than you'll ever be." Mancini chuckled. "Then let us test that." They strung her up by the wrists, just high enough that her feet brushed the bloody tiles. A trail of her blood was smeared from the door to her body, a scent for the beast, a lure. Sullivan's dilemma, Detective Sullivan, stood outside the slaughterhouse, his silver revolver heavy as sin in his hand. He knew what Mancini had planned. He knew the wolf would come, tearing through men like kindling until the river ran red. But what shook him wasn't fear of the beast. It was the knowledge that the beast would come for love. And men who fight for love are the most dangerous of all. The betrayal unfolds. Midnight came, the river whispering against the pilings. The moon hung low, bloated, and red as a bullet wound inside the slaughterhouse. Gianna dangled from her chains. Refusing to scream, Mancini smoked and waited. His soldiers posted with Tommy guns at every door. The Gophers crouched behind crates. Chains ready, Sable loaded a drum magazine. humming a funeral hymn. Then it began. A howl split the river wind, the sound of claws on brick. The thunder of a door ripped from its hinges. The beast burst in, eyes blazing, fur bristling. A monster carved from rage itself. Gunfire erupted, silver rounds streaked sparks across its hide. Chains whipped through the smoke. But the wolf did not hesitate. It went straight for her. Gianna's chains snapped as his claws ripped them from the ceiling. He gathered her up, blood dripping onto his fur, and in that instant all the city's firepower turned on him. Bullets tore through the smoke, silver burned in his flesh. Gianna screamed his name, not Luca, not Wolf King, but simply you. And the beast answered with a howl that shook the slaughterhouse to its foundation. The Gambit's costmen fell like dominoes. Sable's drum chattered until the barrel smoked red. The Gopher's chains tangled. Their bearers dragged screaming into the dark. Mancini's cigar dropped, crushed beneath his shoe as he reached for a pistol with shaking hands. But through it all, the beast carried her, bleeding and furious, carving a path to the river. The trap had been sprung, but the prey had teeth sharper than the snare. The slaughterhouse burned. Flames licked its rafters, smoke choked the sky, and the Hudson reflected it all like a sheet of molten brass. Men ran screaming through the ruin, their guns clattering into the fire, their boots slipping in blood, and through it all, the beast tore toward the river with Gianna in its arms. The riverfront showdown Mancini stumbled out with his lieutenants, his immaculate suit torn, his cigar long gone. He raised his pistol with both hands, the Don of Little Italy shaking like a street corner boy. "Stop him," he bellowed, voice raw. "Stop the damned thing." Sable Caruso obeyed, calm as ever. He climbed atop a crate, Tommy gun braced. The drum loaded with silver rounds, he opened fire. Bullets punched into the beast's back, each one a kiss of fire. Luca staggered, knees buckling, Gianna nearly slipping from his arms. Still, he did not fall. Sullivan's choice detective Sullivan arrived late, breathless, revolver gleaming with the moon's reflection. He saw the wolf bleeding, saw Gianna's pale face against its chest, saw the Mafia's army tightening like a noose. The city had handed him the silver to kill a monster, but what he saw wasn't a monster. It was a man carrying the only thing he loved. "Through hell itself, damn this city," Sullivan muttered, and raised his gun, not at the beast but at Sable. The silver slug caught Sable in the chest. Dropping him off the crate, the Tommy clattered, its drum still full of death it would never spend. Gasps rippled through the gangs. "You shoot the wolf, he kills us all." Sullivan shouted, "You shoot me, the papers will bury you. So choose, Mancini. Tonight you lose or we all burn." The Dons fall for once. Don Vito Mancini had no answer. His empire had been bled by bullets, fear and fur. Mulberry Street was no longer his. The city no longer bent to men in suits. It bent to the howl. He raised his pistol at the wolf. His hand trembled. Gianna's eyes met his. Burning with fury, Luca snarled low, blood dripping from his muzzle. And in that standoff, the truth revealed itself. Mancini wasn't a king. He was just another man clinging to power. The beast lunged. Don Vito's scream ended in a spray of red. His pistol fired once into the sky before his body hit the dock. The age of the Don died with him. The escape. The fire spread to the pilings. The wood snapping, sparks rising like fireflies. The gang scattered, half dead, half fleeing. Their empire collapsing in chaos. The beast, riddled with bullets, limped to the river. Gianna clutched his fur, whispering his name. "Luca, please, don't let it take you for a heartbeat." His eyes flickered, wolf to man, man to wolf. His claws loosened, his breath grew shallow. And then, with one last strength, he hurled himself into the Hudson, Gianna still in his arms. The river swallowed them, aftermath by dawn. The slaughterhouse was nothing but ash. The gangs broken and bleeding. Mancini's corpse was never found. Sable's body was claimed by the river rats. The newspapers wrote of a dockside war, erasing the truth with ink. But the people of New York whispered differently. They said the Wolf King had claimed his throne, that he had taken his queen into the river, away from the guns of men, to rule in the dark water and the moonlight. Detective Sullivan walked Mulberry Street that morning, silver revolver empty, badge heavy in his pocket. He looked at the claw marks carved into the brick, deep as scripture, and knew the city had changed forever. The last howl on the third night after the fire, when the smoke still lingered above the Bowery and the moon climbed fat and pale. A sound echoed from the river, a howl, low, mournful, but strong. The gangs heard it and shivered. The mothers lit their candles. The children whispered the name. The Wolf King lived, and New York would never belong to men alone again, and for those who hunger for more. Step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist, linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.